Welcome to Knowledge Builder. Today's video is about startups in Pakistan. List of Pakistani startups that raised funding in 2021. Pakistani startups raised $345 plus million in venture capital funding in 2021. It was a tremendous year for Pakistani startups. 64 deals, 53 startups, and $345 plus million raised in disclosed startup funding. That's more funding than the previous 8 years combined. 1. Trade. In January, the Karachi-based crypto derivatives startup raised $885,000 in pre-seed funding from Polychain Capital, Pnyx Ventures, ParaFi Capital, Meltem Demirors, Hypershare Ventures, Divergence Ventures, CMS Holdings, and AU21 Capital. In May, Trade raised $6.4 million in seed funding from Three Arrows Capital, Defiance, Polychain Capital, ParaFi Capital, UOB, Mechanism Capital, Pnyx Ventures, IOSG Ventures, Hypershare Ventures, and Finbushi Capital. As of 2021, Trade has raised $7.3 million in disclosed funding. 2. Chkar. The Gilgit-Baltistan-based hospitality startup raised $300,000 in seed funding from MFSYS. 3. Bazaar. In January, the Karachi-based B2B e-commerce marketplace raised $6.5 million in seed funding from Indus Valley Capital, Global Founders Capital, S7V, Wavemaker Partners, Durea Venture Capital, and X Billion Ventures. In August, Bazaar raised $30 million in Series A funding from Defy Partners, Wavemaker Partners, Accrue Capital, Sason Capital, Zane Capital, BNY Venture Partners, Indus Valley Capital, Global Founders Capital, Next Billion Ventures, and Alter Global. As of 2021, Bazaar has raised $37.8 million in disclosed funding, making it the second most well-funded startup in Pakistan. 4. Rinstra. The Islamabad-based digital media platform raised $2 million in Series A funding from undisclosed investors. 5. Vincorp. The Karachi-based B2B app development startup raised $100,000 in seed funding from HRSG. 6. Fitur. The Karachi-based e-commerce startup selling art raised $15,000 in seed funding from Bunyad. 7. 247.pk. The Lahore-based grocery delivery startup raised $150,000 in seed funding from SASP. 8. Daster. In March, the Karachi-based B2B e-commerce marketplace raised $150,000 in seed funding from SASP. In July, Daster raised an additional $3.3 million in seed funding from SASP, ADB Ventures, Seedstars, Edgeberg Partners, Zayani Venture Capital, and TriCap Investments. As of 2021, Daster has raised $3.5 million in disclosed funding. 9. Remote Base. The Lahore-based remote placement startup raised $1.4 million in seed investment from Indus Valley Capital, Draper Associates, and Hustle Fund. 10. Sehih. The Karachi-based telemedicine startup raised $1 million in pre-Series A funding from Islamic Development Bank, 10 Pearls Ventures, Mentors Fund, Impact Investment Exchange, KASB Securities, and DIN Group. As of 2021, Sehih has raised $1.5 million in disclosed funding. 11. Adher. In March, the Karachi-based bookkeeping startup graduated from Y Combinator's Winter 2021 batch and raised $125,000. In November, Adher raised an additional $6 million in seed funding from Fatima Gobi Ventures, Muir Capital, Jam Fund, Commerce Ventures, Liberty City Ventures, Atlas Ventures, and Integra Partners. As of 2021, Adher has raised $6.1 million in disclosed funding. 12. Satapay. The Islamabad-based neobank raised $7.2 million in seed funding from Recharge Capital, Kingsway Capital, and Raptor Group. As of 2021, Satapay has raised $9.3 million in disclosed funding. 13. Icasa. The Lahore-based edtech startup raised $320,000 in pre-seed funding from the I2I Ventures, Wall City Company, Zane Capital. 14. Truckit. In April, the Karachi-based freight marketplace startup raised $1.5 million in pre-seed funding from Global Founders Capital, Fatima Gobi Ventures, DSI Ventures, Bitrate VC, and Plus 92 Ventures. In September, Truckit raised an additional $3 million in pre-seed funding from Global Founders Capital, Fatima Gobi Ventures, Picus Capital, and Zane Capital. As of 2021, Truckit has raised $4.5 million in disclosed funding. 15. Jabberwock Ventures, Cheetah Swift. Jabberwock Ventures, the parent company of Cheetah and Swift, raised $18.5 million in Series B funding from Hummer Windblad Venture Partners, Doris Duke, and Advent International. The amount raised by Jabberwock is a matter of much debate, but it is estimated to be between $16–20 million. According to SecFormD, Jabberwock Ventures set out to raise $40 million, but could only successfully raise $16.7 million. That said, I have learned from a trusted source, the actual amount is close to $18.5 million. 16. Creditbook. In May, the Karachi-based bookkeeping and payment startup raised $1.5 million in seed funding from Bitrate VC, Venture Souk, Better Tomorrow Ventures, Ratio Ventures, Toy Ventures, Quiet Capital, and I2I Ventures. In December, Creditbook raised $11 million in pre-Series A funding from Tiger Global, Better Tomorrow Ventures, First Minu Capital, Banana Capital, Venture Souk, Ratio Ventures, and I2I Ventures. As of 2021, Creditbook has raised $12.5 million in disclosed funding. 17. Retilo. The Karachi-based, HQ in Saudi Arabia, B2B e-commerce marketplace raised $6.7 million in seed funding from Shore Partners, Abercross Holdings, Agfunder, and Arzen Venture Capital. 18. Tadger. The Lahore-based B2B e-commerce marketplace raised $17 million in Series A funding from Kleiner Perkins, Y Combinator Continuity Fund, AAVCF, Fatima Gobi Ventures, Fluxport, Golden Gate Ventures, Liberty City Ventures, and Venture Souk. As of 2021, Tadger has raised $19 million in disclosed funding. 19. Tag. In June, the Islamabad-based neobank raised $5.5 million in pre-seed funding from Quiet Capital, Liberty City Ventures, Fatima Gobi Ventures, and Unpopular Ventures. In September, TAG graduated from Y Combinator's Summer 2021 batch and raised $125,000. Also, in September, TAG raised an additional $12 million in seed funding from Liberty City Ventures, Canaan Partners, Addition, Mantis, Fatima Gobi Ventures, and Banana Capital. As of 2021, TAG has raised $17.6 million in disclosed funding. 20. Trade. The Karachi-based retail stock trading startup raised $4.5 million in seed funding from TTB Partners and Hoff Capital. 21. Abai. In June, the Karachi-based salary advance startup raised $2 million in seed funding from Vostok Emerging Finance, Village Global, Sarmaker, I2I Ventures, and Zain Capital. In September, Abai graduated from Y Combinator's Summer 2021 batch and raised $125,000. In November, Abai raised additional funding in a bridge round from Global Ventures, Next Billion Ventures, VFAB, Rally Cap, Sarmaker, Venture Souk, TPLE Ventures, and I2I Ventures. The amount of funding wasn't disclosed. As of 2021, Abai has raised $2.1 million in disclosed funding. 22. Dawai. The Karachi-based online pharmacy raised $8.5 million in Series A funding from 500 startups in Sarmaker. As of 2021, Dawai has raised $10.5 million in disclosed funding. 23. Jugnu. The Karachi-based B2B marketplace startup raised $3.2 million in Series A funding from Systems Limited. 24. RareSense. The Lahore-based crypto startup raised $400,000 in seed funding from undisclosed investors. 25. Grocer App. The Lahore-based grocery startup raised $5.2 million in Series A funding from Haya Global, Millville Opportunities Fund, Wanda Capital, Jabber Internet Group, Nama Ventures, Hi2 Global, Lean Bricks, and Wall City Company. As of 2021, Grocer App has raised $6.2 million in disclosed funding. 26. Trivsia. The Lahore-based streaming platform raised $400,000 in seed funding from 47 Ventures. 27. Smart Choice. The Karachi-based insurance marketplace raised $150,000 in seed funding from SOSV. 28. Swag Kicks. The Karachi-based e-commerce marketplace for shoes raised $150,000 in seed funding from SOSV. 29. Trucker. The Karachi-based freight marketplace startup raised $600,000 in seed funding from Anchorless and Kino VC. 30. Digikata. The Faisalabad-based small business accounting startup raised $2 million in seed funding from MSA Capital, Shore Partners, SOSV, and Plus 92 Ventures. 31. Maram. The Lahore-based health tech marketplace startup raised $1 million in seed funding from Indus Valley Capital. 32. Airlift. The Lahore-based quick commerce startup raised $85 million in Series B funding from 20 VC, Buckley Ventures, Quiet Capital, and Indus Valley Capital. As of 2021, Airlift has raised $109.2 million in disclosed funding, making it the most well-funded startup in Pakistan. 33. Whaley. The Islamabad-based adtech startup in the influencer marketing space raised $2.7 million in seed funding from Z2C. 34. Nalij. The Lahore-based health tech marketplace startup raised $1.6 million in seed funding from JS Group, Faizuldin Group, and Leonine Tech Ventures. 35. Bridgelinks. The Lahore-based freight marketplace startup raised $10 million in seed funding from 20 VC, Buckley Ventures, Indus Valley Capital, Wavemaker Partners, Quiet Capital, TrueSight Ventures, Soma Capital, Fluxport, and Untitled. 36. Maxid. The Karachi-based edtech startup raised $2.1 million in pre-seed funding from Indus Valley Capital, Alter Global, and Fatima Gobi Ventures. 37. Orin. The The Karachi-based Community Savings startup raised $3 million in seed funding from Zain Capital, Resolution Ventures, I2I Ventures, Hustle Fund, Hi2 Global, and Wavemaker Partners. 38. Kisbay. The Islamabad-based BNPL startup raised $15 million in seed funding from MSA Capital, Global Founders Capital, Fox Ventures, First Check Ventures, and United Bank Limited. The round was a mixture of pre-seed, seed, and debt. Because details are not available, we are filing this under seed for simplicity's sake. 39. PostX. In October, the Lahore-based payments and lending startup raised $1.5 million in seed funding from MSA Capital, Shore Partners, Zain Capital, VentureSoc, P&O Ventures, and Plus 92 Ventures. In November, PostX raised an additional $7.1 million in seed funding from Global Founders Capital, FJ Labs, Runet, MSA Capital, VentureSoc, Alma Capital, Zain Capital, and Shore Partners. As of 2021, PostX has raised $8.6 million in disclosed funding. 40. Integree. The Lahore-based application integration startup, HQ in the U.S., raised $3 million in seed funding from Bonefire Ventures, Operator Collective, Basicum Fund, Silicon Beta, and Lead Pencil. 41. Scholar Den. The Lahore-based edtech startup raised $75,000 in pre-seed funding from multiple angel investors. 42. Taza. In October, the Lahore-based agri-tech marketplace raised $2 million in pre-seed funding from Global Founders Capital, Zain Capital, Ratio Ventures, Wolf City Company, I2I Ventures, Saya Ventures, Globavist, Afripreneur Syndicate, Plus 92 Ventures, Sunu Capital, Musha Investments. In December, Taza raised an additional $4.5 million in pre-seed funding from Fatima Gobi Ventures, Vibe Capital, Shore Partners, Nua Capital, Runet, Alter Global, Julian Capital, Kino Capital, Early Grey Capital, K3 Fund, Global Founders Capital, Zain Capital, I2I Ventures, and angel investors Sahil Bloom, Siki Chen, and Matt Brazina. As of 2021, Taza has raised $6.5 million in disclosed funding. 43. Munchies. The Karachi-based quick commerce startup raised $2.5 million in pre-seed funding from Unilever Pakistan and Venture Dive. 44. Ryder. The Karachi-based e-commerce logistics startup raised $2.3 million in seed funding from Global Founders Capital, Fatima Gobi Ventures, TPLE Ventures, Transhold, and Asian Development Bank. 45. Zaria. The Lahore-based social commerce startup raised $1.7 million in pre-seed funding from Fatima Gobi Ventures, Class 5 Global, and Global Founders Capital. 46. Xavier. The Karachi-based cashback and rewards platform raised $3.3 million in seed funding from Global Founders Capital, Zain Capital, Fatima Gobi Ventures, Rally Cap Ventures, Plus 92 Ventures, and Saya Ventures. 47. Lettuce Kitchens. The Islamabad-based cloud kitchen startup raised $250,000 in seed funding from multiple angel investors. 48. Clicky. The Lahore-based e-commerce retailer raised $2.4 million in pre-Series A funding from Tricap Investments, CSHL, and multiple angel investors. 49. Booking.pk. The Lahore-based e-ticketing startup raised $7.5 million in Series A funding from Zain Capital, Laxon Venture Capita, Hey Global, By Ventures, Jabra Internet Group, Millville Opportunities, and Mentors Fund. As of 2021, Booking.pk has raised $8.8 million in disclosed funding. 50. Baglery. The Karachi-based beauty and fashion e-commerce startup raised $4.5 million in Series A funding from Zain Capital, Laxon Venture Capital, and Hey Global. As of 2021, Baglery has raised $5.4 million in disclosed funding. 51. Cravemart. The Karachi-based quick commerce startup delivering groceries raised $6 million in pre-seed funding round from MSA Capital, Runet, Global Founders Capital, Zain Capital, Saison Capital, 2AM, Meta Ventures, Jeter Capital, and Laxon Venture Capital. 52. Gia. The Lahore-based agri-tech marketplace raised $2.5 million in pre-seed funding round from Sarmaker, Access Bridge Ventures, Jabra Internet Group, Equitai, Seedstars, and angel investors from MENUP, Europe, and North America. 53. Healthwire. The Lahore-based healthcare marketplace raised $3.3 million in Series A funding from 47 Ventures, Habib Bank Limited, and Dilson's Private Limited. Thank you for watching the video. If you like the video, please subscribe and stay connected. Welcome.